Hi everyone, happy Filipinx American History Month. It is October 1st, so we are super early, not Filipino time as a joke. Yesterday we started off with our Filipinx Americans in FinTech, or Finance Tech event. So before everyone had announcements, I was like, we already announced it, we're done. And so today, we're here celebrating FAM for FASTERCON, which is our 4th annual conference. I do want to mention, Anne, I think you spoke at the very first one at 2016. We had a panel in 2015 at UC Berkeley that I had started, and it formed into this massive thing that I think is a little bit more, it runs faster than I can keep up with, no pun intended. And so we are the only multi-stakeholder national nonprofit. We are nonpartisan. Most people know about my civic engagement background before entering into the tech industry, but we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we're focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. We primarily serve the Filipino American or Filipinx American community here in the United States. We do have reach throughout the globe, so I see people calling in from Makati, Philippines today. Mabuhay, welcome. And yeah, we have people throughout the diaspora that find us all the time. People from, I think, Switzerland showed up to our last conference who were visiting Cal. So we have our pretty good reach, but we're really focused on Phil-Ams here in the US. So definitely, if you are watching live, take a screenshot, you can share it. The hashtags today are FASTERCON20 or just FASTERCON and FAM. And then Twitter, Instagram, all the things are FasterSteam. And originally we put this on Slido, but I think most people want to ask questions on Facebook Live or on chat. But please ask your questions early so we can get them in, so Josephine can answer. So I know she is capped for time today. So really quickly, we have our lineup of events for FAM. So first we're starting off with our executive panel. We had 2 pre-events for our undergraduate students for our brand and resume workshop, FinTech folks, and then the main part of our conference. Usually FasterCon we have 1 day and like 8 hours. I think this year we were trying to target 1 or 2 days, but no one wanted 8 hours, so we've decided to break it up into a number of events. So for Friday, we are going to be announcing our Civic Tech, Biotech, and Health Tech panel of everyone fighting COVID-19. On Saturday, we have our Big Arts Day, so we have a special feature we have not announced yet, so check your emails in the next day or so, and you'll see it. So that'll be from like the morning of like 9:30 till about 4 p.m. And then the last day, we have Faster Fresh Entrepreneurship. So we have a big focus on high-tech entrepreneurship. We do also have 2 presentations by actually my classmate, Gino Marco Rosales, who founded Undiscovered. It was really big with Soma Filipinas with Desi Daganan. I can never say his last name correctly, but they are also the founders from the Filipino Night Market, Undiscovered in San Francisco, and Soma Filipinas, which is the historic Filipino district. They've been leading the campaign Filipinos Feed the Frontlines, which we support. So they're actually developing out more of the plan beyond San Francisco into LA and New York, where they're delivering Filipino food, helping save a lot of our Filipino American owned businesses to Filipino essential workers. So it's a huge effort. Our tech committee chair, co-chair Aldrin Montana, who's on our board, has been supporting their tech ops for that, and specifically the shop, Sarap Shop, which was founded by Christian Boyan, who's also a Google alumnus and fellow UC Berkeley classmate of mine. So please donate to them. And outside of that track, we always have our respective tracks for education. So if you're an undergraduate student, grad student, as well as the professionals, we have breakouts and workshops for you both on Saturday and then Sunday for all our high-tech entrepreneurs, start founders, investors. And so today I will have Donnie Rojo calling in. He's still busy at work at Amazon, who used to be on our board. He got so busy with everything. He founded Filipino Americans at Amazon in the Bay Area and was asked to lead the Asian Americans at Amazon Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. He was formerly our board treasurer, is also part of FilPro, so he'll be joining us later today. I also have Ian here, who's our marketing director. That's also the marketing director for H2OAI. And just really quickly for the agenda, so we'll start off with a quick overview that I'm going to give about our organization. Josephine will give her keynote address. We will see what Q&A we can answer because I know we may be pressed for time. And then we'll have all of our different speakers give really quick mini intros. I think some more than others, talking about their career trajectories, their Filipino backgrounds, as well as their companies. And then we'll have some live Q&A from the audience. So really quickly for folks, this is a safe space. You can check out our website for a full code of conduct. So I know that everyone's coming from a different place here. Not everyone is here like me, born and raised in Silicon Valley. We have folks in the Philippines. So just be sure to be respectful of the space, because I know that with Zoom chats, it can get kind of crazy. So please just be mindful of that. And yeah, for our FASTER for the name, so it's a play on words. So when I named it, originally it was called Filipino Americans in Silicon Valley Tech. I previously had scaled Filipinos for Obama, which was 13 cities, and it scaled down to 3 chapters about after 8 some years. And I really wanted to keep it small intentionally, just to make sure we need to take care of the Bay Area. But we had so many alumni from Stanford and UC Berkeley, where I went to school, that were demanding, we need a FASTER chapter in New York, begging for 2 years, can we please have something? We want to start something here in Los Angeles. So we changed the name. So it's actually Filipino Americans in STEAM. So there's a big emphasis on the A that I like to put on it, STEAM, not STEM. The A really stands for the arts. A lot of the folks in our industry, and the reason why we have a whole day dedicated to it is just because there's a lot of people working at the intersection of arts, entertainment, social media, games, these entire other industries that are really critical to the community that we serve. I mean, there's a lot of us in senior leadership positions, but most people don't know that, or they just assume it's only engineering, or you have to be in engineering to work in tech. We're trying to kind of break that stereotype. And then we also don't use the P, because many people have asked me, why don't you use a P and you use an F? Otherwise you'd be called pastor, and we're not a religious organization. And then for all us nerdy engineers, it's just all about efficiency, so moving quick and fast. So quickly on our story, we're founded in 2015. We've doubled in size in 2 years. Charity Nicholas is on our board, who I think is joining us in a little bit. She also is the Cal or UC Berkeley Filipino American Alumni Chapter, is a mom of 4. I don't know how she does it all, but she also founded another nonprofit for students of color and particularly high school outreach to encourage them also to join into tech, or sorry, encourage them to enter tech careers. And so we've joined forces trying to make sure we're doing a lot of K-12 outreach, not just undergraduate student outreach as well. And we also, in the last few years before joining, formerly it was TFC, it's a Collective Hustles mentorship program. Charity and I founded a mentorship program starting off with UC Berkeley and Stanford, about 50 students a year. Now we source about 50 to 60% of the students for Collective Hustle, which is national in the United States. It's not only tech. And now we're doing a lot of self-research with a lot of different folks, which you'll hear about from our coronavirus panel, everyone that's working on vaccine development, test kits, data collection for our community is very inaccurate right now. So watch out for that. That's coming soon. And here's a quick overview of our conferences. They're just pictures from previous FASTERCONs. So day 2, again, we have Yobi Benjamin, who will be our keynote. He actually, I think, between he and I, we tried to get 550 Filipino workers test kits on the Princess cruise. That didn't work out. We had Assemblyman Rob Bonte, who is a good friend of mine that I helped campaign for, take care of that, but he's donated generously ventilators to the UK and is doing a ton of work. We have a number of scientists, epidemiologists, public health and safety experts, folks in biotech. Tim Castillo, who's at Roche, actually works on data dashboards for COVID-19. So that's going to be really exciting. We're also talking about 3D printed PPE with Vice Mayor Jocelyn Manalo, who's a good friend of mine, who I also helped support in her election very early on. And my co-founder, who's what we say it's a stealth company, previously at AUKUS, Julian Chung, who's Filipino Korean, who actually used to study at Stanford and so is a part of the Stanford 3D PPE project. I said the secret thing was actually Bobby Rubio. We're having a special screening of Float, so more about this will be sent in your emails, as well as our full Arts Day panel. And then lastly, Faster Fresh Entrepreneurship. So quickly on who we are, I've mentioned myself, Ian, and Charity, as well as Aldrin. Jamie Crystal's holding it down at Airbnb. It's also our creative director. So she's been rebranding a lot of us, really elevating our design. And then Christian Dolores, who's in Los Angeles, is heading our chapter there. There's a couple of people who are left off here just because we didn't have a ton of time and room. Our New York chapter is transitioning. Chicago is about to start, and I think Seattle. And there's always requests all throughout the country. And then John Salazar, who is at Salesforce, got promoted. So he took a step down, but he's still one of our main liaisons as we work with Salesforce as one of our partners for our online community database. We have a ton of advisors from investors in the Valley, media. Liz Deltangla actually spoke yesterday, who started the Blood Debts podcast. So you should all check that out. It's dropping in the next few days. And then I mentioned again, Donnie will be on. Evelyn founded Filipinos at Pinterest, is now at Stripe. And then Karina Kalanok, I think, got promoted to the only data scientist at her company. So she had to take a step back, but we're always growing. So quickly about our org. FASTER is really broken down into three main components: education, professional development, and innovation. FASTER functions, Filipino American undergraduate crew, tech and color, which is our K-12 component. Professionals, we have a loose collective of pretty much, I can't say the exact number of Filipinx American employee resource groups in the Valley. Not everyone has one. Some folks are part of the larger Asian American and Pacific Islander API employee resource groups, as well as underrepresented communities of color, like, for example, Pandora. One of the other people I forgot to mention, Jerome Entendido, is one of our advisors who's heads, I think he's the program manager in diversity, equity, inclusion at Pandora and Sirius through the acquisition. And Pandora Mixtape is their broader people of color organization. And then Faster Fresh, obviously, for entrepreneurship. If you want to start a chapter, we'll drop these links into the chat throughout our evening. If you want to start one, I think we're still trying to onboard a bunch of folks from San Diego, from Boston, Florida, all over the place. And yeah, we're just really a network for Filipino Americans in tech, really connecting folks, creating these spaces and growing them. So one last quick thing I did want to plug is supporting our displaced workers. Not everyone is employed in tech right now. A lot of people were laid off. So if you do have jobs and you're hiring, from your company, please check out the doc. Right now it's just on Google. We're still revamping our website to redesign everything and have a job board so that Filipino Americans are hiring other Filipino Americans in tech. It's super important to us. And yeah, like if you're a student, because I get emails from all over the country all of the time, they need a mentor, they're looking for mentorship, they're just graduating, or they're thinking about joining into tech and switching their major or whatnot, you can fill out this other form here, Faster Function. And yeah, so these are just quickly some of the other pictures, other events that we're having. Our blockchain event, which was originally scheduled for pre-events, are now going to be in November. And then we always do whiteboarding algorithms, interview prep for everyone that's on the track for software engineering. We're hoping of adding drop-in office hours for portfolio critique for aspiring designers. And then on the business end, just general resume workshop for product managers, anyone that's in biz dev. A lot of different roles I did not mention there. There's far too many to fit in, but those are sort of the three main tracks that we're sort of looking at. And then for Faster Pros, this is us at Facebook last fall. And at Amazon, I think this is about 2 years ago. So we've helped grow. I think Nightplace already started because of Anne, but there's a ton of other employee research groups we helped start. So Filipinos at Twitter, or Twitter Asians, Amazon, Filipinos at LinkedIn has been trying to form the last few years. Filipinos at Workday, we are so glad to have on board here with Paul, and the Filipinos at Riot Games. One of our other advisors, Christina Laskowski, who was really instrumental in a lot of the angel investing capital in the Philippines, is a part of strategic management at VMware. So she's also trying to start a Filipino American ERG there. And we're growing. If you have an employee resource group at your company, please fill out the form and join us. If you're a part of one, please still join. I think people are looking for members all the time. I know at Google, I always send people over to FGN, Filipino Googlers Network. If you're like alone at a company and you're like, hey, I don't have one, consider starting one, or maybe join an Asian American or people of color one, get involved. We always encourage that. So these are some of the amazing employee resource groups that are a part of our community. We want to grow this list. It's obviously much longer. I can't even keep track how many are growing every day. But we know our numbers in tech, we're still underrepresented as much as we have great leaders like the ones on the panel here today. We want to keep growing that. And let's see the last few things. We did talk about these already. Oh yeah, quick calls to action. So for all our professionals that are on the line, I know that FASTER only has so many events a year. I get requests all the time to speak. We may have to start capping the number of speakers at our events because it gets pretty crazy. I'm actually still working on another book for FASTER. Dado Bonitao and DJ Kubert both agreed to be a part of this book. So if you would like to be a part of this book, you can actually click on, or we'll drop this also link in the chat in a little bit. To do that. And if you're just like super, strapped for time, you can always, mentor a student. We don't have a huge level of commitment there. There's many different ways to get involved. If you're thinking about joining our leadership, do fill out a form. We get people all the time that, want to join FASTER as a part of our national board. I know Ian had spoken at our event at FASTERCON last year, so we definitely recruit from a lot of our events, and we get people from all over the country all the time. And then lastly, in terms of COVID-19, we have a working group. We get emails, again, all the time about what are we doing about vaccine development in the Philippines. There's a multi-pronged strategy there. I actually helped coordinate donations for my family, I think when I was 18, and asking Dado Bonitao, can we give money for SARS and avian flu research, because my parents were pretty involved in the Philippine Pathology Center in the Philippines and had worked in biotech for 30 years here in the US. So it isn't small for like 10 million pesos or whatever the presidency has there. It's a very big effort to think through the next few years. But if you're a scientist, a researcher, or just a concerned citizen, we need people everywhere that are Filipino American, just because our community is so impacted. So definitely check that out. And then find us on social. So we are on Facebook. We have a group. If you are not on it and you went to one of our events, you can like message me. I'll send you our membership form. We're trying to really track our numbers, just because we don't have really clean numbers at every company. Not every company can sort of tell us how many Filipino Americans work at their companies. I think Google and others are still trying to change that. Filipino Googlers Network, I'm pretty sure, had fought for the box that you check off for undergraduate students who are filling out applications for scholarship for anyone that's majoring in a STEAM field to be an intern at Google. So before, there was nothing Filipino. It was just Asian American and like Pacific Islander, maybe Native Hawaiian. There was nothing that said Filipino or Southeast Asian on it. So that's actually really important. We're on LinkedIn as a group. There's a fan page. If you have friends that missed this event, you can watch it on YouTube. Currently, we're redesigning our website. And then our email list is the main way to contact us. If you don't like looking at Facebook or LinkedIn or any of the things, I would suggest to subscribe to our email list. We don't send very many. We try to make sure not to spam anyone. Any other questions, you can email us at contact us at fastersteam.org. And my last big plug, just because I used to work at civic engagement, is please register to vote. API Vote is our other national community partner. They're a nonpartisan nonprofit, so they've been around for a really long time. Please encourage all your family to vote. It's a really important election. Regardless of what party you're a part of, we want to make sure our community is counted and voicing its concerns around all the issues that affect them. And our community partners, Collective Hustle, we're going to have Romy Marquez. He's the dude in the front with the two hands up. He's actually a big part of FASTER. So he's the head of Collective Hustle in the mentorship program. So he'll be emceeing our Arts Day, and then YFPA, Your Philippine Professional Association, which is based out of here in the Bay Area. Regina Finley-Iyer is also the head of, I think, HR and talent at another biotech company, a genus that we're hoping to partner with for really building out the pipeline for Filipino Americans in biotech. And with that, I'm just going to say a quick couple of words about myself. So I'm Erin. Most of you that know me from FASTER know me from my book, Creating Augmented and Virtual Realities. You can find me at all the things, so creating AR, VR, Erin Jerry, FASTER STEAM. I'm pretty responsive. I wanted to copy one of Josephine's slides because I actually never labeled this before, but I was born and raised here in Silicon Valley. My parents worked in biotech for 30 years, as I mentioned before, and a ton of my family's in tech. My cousin was an investor in Caliber, Rover, which is a YC-backed startup founded by Dexter Gordon, who is one of the founders of Filipinos for Obama, and Paul Rivera. So they're both good friends of mine. And then, yeah, my aunties and uncles worked on the semiconductor line at Selectron. Another auntie worked at Oracle. And yeah, like I was very privileged to have that growing up. I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley or outside of it that are coming in, didn't have the background that I had. So it's a huge privilege to be from Silicon Valley. And so I always want to make sure I represent that. But before working in tech, I worked for 5 years in civic engagement. Specifically, I was interested in like the 3 main policies were immigration, housing, and tech policy. And the last big job that I had in that industry was working for, outside of Obama for America, Ro Khanna for Congress. So Congressman Ro Khanna used to be the former Deputy U.S. Secretary of Commerce. He was known as the tech congressman and the co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign. No plugs there. He also endorsed Joe Biden. This is completely nonpartisan. That's just his background because most people don't know who Ro is. I like to think of FASTER, going from civic engagement and into the tech industry as a way to find like my extended family, doing a lot of nonprofit organizing in the past. I was always looking for like, what's the Filipino like thing or professional thing in my industry. So these are just some of us, some of my favorite events, at Amazon, that was very small and intimate at the time when Donnie had joined. Our leadership was at Salesforce to the right, and then our last big event at Facebook. So yeah, I think the last thing I'll mention is, so I'm stealth right now. I'm working on COVID-19 research, so this is what keeps me up at night, and supercomputing, so high performance computing and virtual reality. HPC goes with AI or artificial intelligence quite a lot. And I previously was a part of the Oculus Launchpad program, which is for content creators, anyone that's sort of like an entrepreneur that's really utilizing the Oculus platform. So it's a diversity and equity inclusion program as a part of Oculus. And the last few plugs, yeah, my book is now in Korean because I think I mentioned this last time at Facebook. It was to be translated in Korean and Japanese. So I got these from my editors today, so you can find it. You can also find it on Amazon in English, but I'm hoping Japanese will come soon. And for anyone else here that is thinking about writing, technical documentation or not, it doesn't really matter to me. As long as like you're putting out your work. I have an example here that folks can click through. I'm going to be sending out the presentation at the end of this event. And so yeah, this will be really good for folks to just encourage more people to write more technical content or anything about your career in tech. Lastly, I give back a lot to community in terms of D&I, not just the Filipino community. So organizations like Women in Code, Sheet 256, which is Women in Blockchain, had another nonprofit for AR/VR. And outside all of that, most people don't know, I love music. It could have been an entirely other career path that I chose not to go on. But I did everything between spoken word, music production, etc. And I play pool and I love anime. I'm a huge sci-fi geek, watching all kinds of things on Netflix. And yeah, these are my last few things. So I'm probably the example of the most non-traditional thing that you can get, even though my parents had wanted me to double major in computer science and bioinformatics. They said, well, there's people getting deported, in our extended family who's doing something about that. So I thought I was going to be an immigration and IP intellectual property lawyer. I would come back into tech at some point, but I did not have any idea of this path of I'd be working on VR and AI, and confidentially I may be teaching in the fall in those areas that's not announced yet and into next year. But I just want to make sure that I share a little bit of my story so that a lot of the youth that are joining us today, they know that it can be a potential career path for them. That's me, my parents in Ro Khanna, and my auntie used to work at Oracle. Oh yeah, my last thing, I was a Philippine news correspondent. I know that a lot of media are here today, so when people ask me how did you make that transition, it was not easy, and having the most privilege that I have of every major CTO at the Valley, every sort of like pioneer, that were really, the founders of Silicon Valley, it was still hard looking around the room and not seeing a ton of Filipinos that looked like me that could even donate to our campaign. I think it was only Dado Banatao, who's one of our tech pioneers and has, really supported FASTER, as well as I think it was Auntie Jocelyn Ding, who at the time was the highest ranking Pinay at Google, who's now at Uda Health, used to be at Omada Health. That was it. There really wasn't anybody. So, he always wanted to increase that. And I think the reason why I was so involved in community and in campaigns specifically, my sort of take of it was how do you utilize technology en masse to do mass civic engagement. And so working for Ro and in the district between Fremont to Cupertino was always trying to make sure I was doing that sort of outreach outreach and utilizing technology in that way, maybe not in the way that had happened with like 2016, but that was sort of the intention, and I ended up, transitioning it completely differently into tech, but I actually understand the AI algorithms now and the recommendation systems that are, serving ads on Facebook and Netflix and all that good stuff. I know Anne can talk way more deeply about all of that, but I did retrain in the industry. So while, I studied a bunch of different things at UC Berkeley, which for most people, like, I get really embarrassed about it. And it's something that I've had to fight in terms of imposter syndrome. Was I was taking classes all over the place. I know at UC Berkeley you can sort of invent your own major, but I retrained the last 3 years, really focusing on AI, specifically on computer vision. So that's hopefully what I'll be teaching on into next year. And I also was a part of the programs in data ethics. I think that's super important in our community to really think about, the collection of our community's data, how that's utilized, who are the people who are working, on that data and the products that come out of that. So yeah, that's just a little bit more about me. If you have other questions, please feel free to DM or message me. I'm accessible to everyone. I may not get back to you right away. But with that, I do want to get started with our keynote. So while I am responding to Cisco and Larissa's trying to get on board, I want Ian to quickly introduce our very esteemed keynote speaker, Josephine Santiago-Bond. I've been emailing Josephine for like over a year, asking her every few months, like, hey, we have Faster event, can you come? I thought she was in Mountain View, and she was actually in Florida. She's a former head of advanced engineering at NASA, and now she can tell us what the differences with KSC Institutional Safety Division. But Ian, did you want to read off a little bit of Josephine's bio before we get started? Is Ian still here? It's like, I don't know if he dropped out. Okay, well, Josephine, we can have you actually share screen and introduce yourself. That works.
Yeah, so I hope that my connection is going to hold up. Can you hear me good?
Yes.
All right, it's telling me it's not, but I'm going to chug on. If I drop off, I'm going to call back with my phone. So good evening, everyone. I'm Josephine Santiago-Bond. I go by Jo. I'm happy to be here celebrating Filipino American History Month with you. I've been working at Kennedy Space Center, KSC, here in Florida for the last 17 years, but I'm calling you from my son's bedroom, which has been my office for the last 6 months. Next slide, please.
Oh.
And I think my, I can't see, so you'll just have to tell me if it's there. Is it the map?
Yep.
Yes, we see you.
All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Filipino by heritage and both Filipino and American by birth. I was born in America, but I grew up in the Philippines, and I came back to America as an adult. I understand a little bit of Ilocano, basit lang, gamay nga Bisaya, at mahusay ako mag-Tagalog, very mahusay. Next slide, please. That should be my family. So this is my family. My parents are both retired PhDs in fisheries, AKA fish doctors, who spend half of their time here in Florida with me and my family, and half of the time in the Philippines. They were in the midst of their PhD program when in Auburn University when I was born. And so that was why I became a US citizen from birth. My eldest sister is a physician and she married an engineer. Our middle sister is a veterinarian who married another veterinarian, and they have 2 college kids. I'm the youngest in the family. I'm an engineer, and my husband is also an engineer, and we have a 7-year-old son. So what my niece and nephew and my son are going to be, that remains to be seen. I think we might have 2 engineers and an actress / nurse in the family soon, but we'll see. So this picture, it captures my heart in one photo. It's my family. My family is the source of my inspiration, and they motivate me. So they've set the bar so high, in my opinion, and I've been very blessed to have them as role models. There's nothing special about the photo itself, it's just a place in New York, but I remember how happy we were when we were there together. And of course, it's hard for the family to be gathered in one place these days due to COVID-19. So I'm sharing that with you. Next slide, please. So my education, I grew up in the Philippines since I was 2 months old. And I went to Assumption Antipolo for grade school, and I credit them for my Catholic values, which I believe shaped me. It certainly prepared me for living away from home since age 12. So I attended Philippine Science High School, or PSI, in Quezon City. So early on, as the name of the school suggests, there was already a heavy STEAM exposure between my school and my family. And yes, arts was included. I lived in the PSI dorms from age 12 to 16. And to quote a PSI friend, she said, "It's like Hogwarts, but for nerds." And when I say nerd, don't get offended. I say that term very affectionately because I'm one of you. I became an electronics and communications engineer from the University of the Philippines, which was not a walk in the park for me, but I graduated on time, which is an accomplishment in itself. If you've ever studied in UP, you would know what I'm talking about. And I was very fortunate to have had and still have plenty of role models and encouragement from my family, you know, to pursue just about any career. But of course, it had to be moral, ethical, legal, you know, or else they probably disown me. So backing up, when I was in high school, I decided to be an engineer during a casual conversation with one of my friends, a former schoolmate who was a freshman engineering student at that time in UP. So her excitement was so contagious that it was really enough for me to get interested in becoming an engineer. I was undecided at that point, but it was so easy for her to inspire me, which, you know, I felt like I was swayed. I was on the fence and I got swayed into engineering, but I'm glad that that happened because I have loved being an engineer. And this is part of why I do these outreach activities. To tell you the truth, I hate public speaking. So, you know, even though I've done it a few times, it's like, it still scares me. But I do this because I do it in case my life story can somehow help someone who's on the fence to reach an important decision in their lives. Now, if you've read some of my past interviews, you may have read about my math struggles in college. And before you accuse me of causing all the NASA failed missions, the truth is that I was really above average with math. So what the articles didn't say was that I passed an advanced placement exam to skip the early math in college. But I made the higher math and engineering courses harder than they needed to be because I didn't have very good study habits in college. Maybe part of it was complacency. I got used to getting by with little effort, and then it caught up with me. I would say my social life was at the top of my priority list at that time, and frankly, my grades suffered. I didn't appreciate the power of a decent GPA at that time. And I felt like, looking back, I was arrogant because I was a UP student, and who cares about what my GPA was? Well, apparently, a lot of companies here in the US care. So it wasn't anyone else's fault but mine. I was distracted from the one job that I truly had during that time, which was to study. So sure, I had fun. That was very short-sighted, to have so much fun, maybe too much fun at the expense of my grades. And I felt like I was irresponsible for the hard-earned money that my parents used to pay my tuition. I finally got my priorities straightened out when I continued into graduate school here in the US, mainly one, because I saw how good grades can open more and new doors for me. And two, the tuition fee was just plain expensive. I couldn't afford to repeat any of the courses. So I couldn't even apply to certain schools or internships, like just looking at the requirements, you know, with my low GPA after they converted my UP grades from undergrad. They were horrible after converting them. So I studied harder in grad school, and this time I managed to get straight A's, which was a brand new thing for me. But I was motivated and there was no time to goof around. I learned time management by necessity because I had 2 jobs and grad school, so that leaves me very little for social life. But I always made time for family. During that time, I lived with my sister, my brother-in-law, and their 2 kids, and they were much smaller during that time. And they helped me get through that phase. So I'd say family is is everything. My graduate advisor, he saw some potential in me and enough to bring me to Kennedy Space Center with him for the first time in summer of 2003. Just doing a faculty fellowship program, and then he needed someone. I think he brought me along because he didn't want to do the hazardous lab tests himself, but I recognized the opportunity when I saw it and I seized it. So I spent a summer at KSC. I earned, I think, $- that summer. The internship expenses, just traveling down to Florida and my rent over here were more than my grant allowance. And I still had expenses in South Dakota, but I was in it for the experience. I was in it for the long-term effects. So from there, I was encouraged by my new friends at KSC. I had just met them that summer to apply for an opportunity to work as a graduate student intern. And they paid me enough to break even, maybe a little bit more, but I was employed as a NASA civil servant. I'd say good grades were very important in getting my foot in that NASA door, that particular one. And building a network, building authentic relationships is also important. I'd go for quality over quantity. And that's how I heard about those networks. That's how I heard about the rare opportunities. They took a chance with me because they knew what I was capable of. And they advocated for me when I wasn't there in the boardroom. Next slide, please. So for work experience, with my first jobs, I achieved minimum wage. That was easy enough as long as I was humble enough to accept a job, not glamorous, not exactly a career, but decent, checks the boxes of moral, ethical, legal. That was sufficient, but not very fulfilling. So I moved the bar higher. I knew I wasn't going to stay there. Then my goal was to be in a position where I can be comfortable and secure, and then eventually be where I could give back. I found that the more that I achieve things, the more that I'm able to give. So that's time, talent, ideas, and whatever I can afford to share within certain limits. Next slide, please. So over 51 years ago, I think 51 now, the first humans landed on the moon. And before that point, it was viewed impossible. In my case, up until 17 years ago, I never imagined that I would ever work for NASA. I didn't even know that there was a space station above us, and I was oblivious to a lot of these things. But my imagination was limited by what I told myself. So I was limiting myself. What I told myself was possible for an electronics engineer from the Philippines who graduated with mediocre grades. But I found that I'm a hard worker. I worked my way up. I was armed with the work ethic that I inherited from my parents. They didn't have to tell me, I just saw it. And the quality of education from UP is great quality. So I went from a graduate student intern to a full-time electronics engineer, a systems engineer, to the chief of the flight systems engineering branch, to becoming the chief of advanced engineering development. And now, for the last year, I'd been the chief of the institutional division of KSC Safety and Mission Assurance. So what do I do? Very diverse scope, but if I were to summarize it, I push boundaries, I make risk-based decisions, and I make sure that our employees go home safely every day. And that's about 2,000 civil servant employees at Kennedy Space Center. And I don't know the count of the contractors right now. I think like over 5,000 contractors, and then plus the daily workers that we don't keep track of as closely, plus partners. So there's quite a bit of people working at the Space Center. And so my group enables safe and successful access to space. I'm no longer building those electronic systems myself. That's not my job anymore, but I hire and I build these diverse teams of very capable and very hardworking individuals. So the not so secret to my success is that I've tried to do my very best in every job that I've had, big or small. I can tell you that when I started as a cashier at Marsh supermarket in Fishers, Indiana, and it's closed now. I went there, it wasn't even there anymore. I was the best cashier in that place. You know, I was the happiest, and you know, I was proud of what I was doing, even though I knew I didn't want to be there forever. And bigger opportunities just kept coming. And when the opportunities didn't come on their own, I knew to ask for opportunities. I knew to create my own opportunities, and I also knew to apply for them. I started off at KSC designing these new technologies, mostly for what we call ground systems. Simply put, they're the systems that make rocket launches possible at KSC. Looking back, processing the space shuttles at the tail end of the space shuttle program and being there in the firing room for launch countdown was probably the most exciting time for me. And Ares 1X, in that picture there next to the space shuttle, the one that's launching, Ares 1X test flight became the most memorable for me. It was a large project with a new rocket, new ground systems, and I was part of it from start to finish, which is unusual. You know, our programs usually span like 20, 30 years, and you know, you couldn't get to it from end to end unless you just got lucky and stayed on that long. But from the design of the ground systems to operations, launch, and closeout, I didn't do everything myself, obviously, but I was part of a team, and it's always a team. And that's one of our values at Kennedy Space Center is teamwork. Within the same year, I got to my first NASA leadership program called FIRST. I got married the same year, and I applied, keyword applied, and got promoted to a bigger systems engineering role. You know, the promotion wasn't handed to me. It was a competitive promotion, and I applied for it, which is requirement number one to be considered for an advertised job at NASA. You know, I don't let other people, I let the other people decide whether they want me or not, but my job is to apply, right? The leadership program wasn't handed to me either. I had to apply for it twice. So the first rejection hurt a lot, but I didn't let it discourage me. I worked harder, and I believe some people noticed that. And then I found my first advocates in my management chain who tapped my shoulder the next year to encourage me when the second round of applications came. And, you know, I wasn't even going to apply at that point, you know, just because I was lazy to fill out that really long application form. But I was like, gosh, you know, they're asking me, and maybe I do have a chance. So this time I got accepted. A few years later, I got into a second NASA leadership program. And, you know, these things cost quite a bit. So, you know, NASA invests in you when they pay for these things. And you can hear the theme here where it's basically my love for lifelong learning. You know, my year-long assignment for that program was in the Bay Area. It was at Ames Research Center, right there in your backyard. And it was to help integrate and test a mission called LADEE. And it, you know, it went into orbit around the moon in 2013. That means that a small part of me has orbited the moon and slammed onto the lunar surface, purposely, of course, and produced a wealth of data for the world's scientists to process. I think that's pretty cool. You know, I'm not going to take credit for the whole program. You know, I was just there for a year, but I thought that was pretty cool to be part of it. That same year, I had my one and only baby boy, so our 7-year-old now. Fast forward, I got another promotion. I went on a couple of lateral moves, this time with a gentle nudging from my mentors. And I'll talk about the mentors later. I transitioned from leading teams to leading people. From leading teams to leading a couple of large engineering branches, and to leading now my division that's about 2 to 3 times the size. This time in safety and mission assurance. So I kind of got out of my engineering comfort zone, and now I'm in safety and mission assurance, and I have a staff of 50-50 almost, engineers and safety specialists. What I found was it didn't matter where I was. The care and feeding of my employees continues to be the most important aspect of my job. And, you know, leaning forward to create that culture that is so much more than checking for good engineering and safety compliance. You know, I think that's really a good culture to build, and also being an integral part of the design, analysis, test, and, you know, just being a true partner in mission success. Now, you know, truly caring that we keep employees safe from hazards of their jobs, and sometimes it's even keeping them safe from themselves and enabling everyone to go home safely at the end of the day. That's very fulfilling for me. I know it doesn't sound as exciting as technical achievements, but it's really all about people. And the Space Center really is, you know, like, even though it sounds like NASA is all on the technical side, we are full of a workforce that is very diverse. You know, we have people who are lawyers, human resources, public affairs, you know, so we have all these different jobs over there. And it's good, I think it's good experience for me to see like a different side of the center. Thinking back, you know, think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you imagine that pyramid, you know, safety and security are basic needs just above food, water, you know, warmth, rest. And then we can talk about psychological needs, belongingness, relationships, feeling of accomplishment. And then only then can you talk about like achieving your full potential. So I'm very proud of the work I do. NASA has been ranked the best place to work for in the federal government for an agency of its size for the 7th year in a row. And that's based on employee feedback across the whole federal government. And Kennedy Space Center is ranked the highest out of the 10 NASA centers. So that's a testament to the culture we've created and the leadership that we have here. You know, we've already hired and continue to hire capable people, you know, very capable people. And then happy, capable people produce even greater results. Taking a break from me, the portfolio of projects that I've supported include, well, I have a few that I'll mention that really get me excited. You may see our contribution in space fluid transfer capability. So it'll launch soon in a couple of years. It'll extend the lifespan of an existing satellite. The satellite's nearing the end of its life due to low propellant, but and we're going to do that even though the satellite was not originally meant to be serviced in orbit. I think that's very cool. And then one of our payloads is headed for the moon in probably 2 to 3 years. It's a science instrument, which actually it has heritage being a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer, and we had customized it for the lunar environment to monitor in the vicinity that the lander lands on. But there's also a mission that will use that same instrument and have it ride on a rover. You know, so the whole thing about, I have a kid who has books about the moon, and some of them were probably published a lot earlier than 2009, and it'll say something like the moon is dry. I'm like, it's not dry, the moon is not dry. So we had missions that proved that, and now we're trying to get the ground truth for it. So if you haven't already heard, there's water ice on the moon, and we need to figure out how to process it, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this mission. I've since left the project. You know, I went from being a systems engineer over there to backing out and being the supervisor of the systems engineer, and then backing out and being the supervisor of the research and technology folks. And now I'm literally at the sidelines, just involved in the safety aspects of it. But my husband has stayed on, and he is one of the avionics engineers over there. So I'm cheering from the sidelines. Now, this may seem unrelated to your daily lives, especially those that are halfway around the globe, but some of the NASA projects are actually innovations that help us improve routine tasks on Earth. So, you know, we develop these technologies, but also in the process, we're developing ways to do routine tasks more accurately, more repeatably, safer, faster, cheaper. And so I encourage you to go online and read on NASA spin-offs. And I challenge you to recognize those that affect your daily lives, from the farming of the food that you eat, to the fabrics and sunglasses that you wear, to the treatments that you may receive at the hospitals. Just, try to spot it in your daily life. And to those that are in or want to get into STEAM, you're already one step closer just by being interested. I would say find a mentor. And when you do, look for someone who's already involved in STEAM, someone who inspires you, who's willing to spend time with you, someone who will be honest in providing you with feedback, someone who is not very similar to you, because diversity of thought and experiences is very valuable, and that's what's going to help you grow. And look for someone who is capable of helping you overcome either the real and or the perceived obstacles to entering your chosen field. This may be one or multiple people, and they may not even, you don't have to tell them that they're the mentor. You can just, pick their brains every now and then, just have lunch with them, pick their brain, have a phone call, just kind of target what it is that you want to grow that they might be able to help you with. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to be the only blank in the blank. So don't be afraid to be the only woman in the class. Like in engineering, we had fewer women. In my branch, in the early years, I might have been like the only woman in a branch of a dozen people. But don't be afraid, and don't be uncomfortable that you're the only woman in a meeting or in an office, or the only millennial in the sea of Gen Xers or baby boomers, or the only Filipina or Filipino or Filipinx in the company, or the only blank in the blank. So, a second person who has all the same fears will likely come around, and you will have done that person a favor by being the first and becoming a supporter and an ally. You have to really believe that you bring great value from your uniqueness, and it isn't the source of your weakness. And when you succeed, you have to remember to pay it forward. One of the ways is by mentoring. Now, as a supervisor, my measure of success is no longer in doing the exciting projects myself, although I have to say, I didn't realize that safety was so dynamic. But now it's in creating a safe and positive environment for my employees, so they can bring their whole selves to work and to enable them to be their best while working on their projects. If you're still in school, I hope that you do your best in school. I know it's hard to hear, like, I remember my parents telling me this, like, do well, get better grades or whatever. And it was just hard to hear, but I'm telling you because I realize the value now, not just to get good grades, but to really learn the fundamentals that will help you to do well in college and the rest of your lives. Being the best student you can be is your job right now. And I hope that you'll be able to determine what career you want to get into sooner rather than later. And that will require honest self-assessment, self-awareness, and a bit of courage. If you're already working, you're out there in the industry, you need to be performing your best in your current job, no matter if it isn't your dream job. And you should be looking for that dream job on the side. In the future, my hope is that all of us have a choice, that you will choose to work for a company, for an employer that allows you to bring your whole selves to work and to enable you to be your best. And I'm coming to the end of my presentation. I really hope that there are some useful nuggets here in my personal story that each of you can take and just apply in your own way, or that you can relate to. But thank you, FASTERCON. Thank you for having me, and thanks for listening. Maraming salamat po.